Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another bill training for our Mom Congress 2023 Moms Agenda. My name is Crystal McCauley. I'm very excited to be here with you all today. And if you are watching the recording, we are glad that you've taken the time to learn with us today about the Expanding Childcare in Rural America Act of 2023. I am very thankful to be joined by a wonderful Mom Congress partner today in Whitney Pesic, who's joining us from the National Women's Law Center. I will let her give an introduction here in a moment, but first, our little bit of housekeeping. We would like for you, you can access the links in chat, but we are going to let you go ahead and see if your legislator is already signed on to this bill. So what we're going to do is, Ebony, you can go to the next slide and I will pull the links for chat. You can start by looking up HR 3922, which is the House bill for the Expanding Childcare in Rural America Act. You want to go ahead and toggle over to the co-sponsors tab, see if your legislator is already listed there. And then we want to go ahead and go back to the Senate version of the bill. So I just put that in the chat too. It's S1867. And you can see if either one of your two senators are already listed as a co-sponsor on this bill. So thank you for doing that little bit of homework. And I will go ahead and turn it over to Whitney. And thank you again for being here. And if you'll tell us a little bit more about the National Women's Law Center and your role there. And thanks again for your time.
Thanks, Crystal, and good morning and good afternoon to everyone. I'm really excited to be here with you all today and excited to see you all in DC in a couple weeks. I actually live in the DC area and am excited to welcome you. My name is Whitney Pesic. I'm the Director of Federal Child Care Policy at the National Women's Law Center. I do not have any kids of my own, but I am a second generation early educator. I was an early Head Start teacher before I went to law school. So this subject is very near and dear to my heart. I also grew up in Appalachian, Ohio. So to talk about rural childcare also is really important to me. And I'm excited that you all are going to be advocating on this important legislation. For those of you that are not familiar with the National Women's Law Center, we fight for gender justice in the courts, in public policy, and in our society, working across the issues that are central to the lives of women and girls. We use the law in all its forms to change culture and drive solutions to the gender inequity that shapes our society, and to break down the barriers that harm all of us, especially women of color, LGBTQ+ people, and low-income women and families. For 50 years, we have been on the leading edge of every major legal and policy victory for women. And thank you for dropping our website in the chat. So I am here today to talk to you all about the Expanding Childcare in Rural America Act of 2023. As many of you know, childcare is a critical issue for families across the country, particularly those that have folks that have low incomes, as well as in rural areas. Access to childcare can be a real determining factor in a family's ability to work, pursue education, and provide for their children. And it's also a critical piece of early childhood development. And it's also a significant piece of our workforce. Over 90% of early educators are women, and disproportionately women of color. So it's really important that childcare is there to serve as the backbone for other workforce people that are participating in the workforce. It's important to be quality for the children in childcare, and it's also really important that those early educators are paid wages and given benefits worthy of their work. So there's really three important pieces when it comes to childcare. As I'm sure many of you know, either from your own struggles with childcare or your colleagues or family members, but most of our country is actually what is called a childcare desert. That's where there are less licensed childcare spots than there there are less spots available than there are children who need those spots. And it's actually a lot worse in rural areas than in urban areas. And so that's why, this bill is also really important, is because even though folks all, in all corners of the country are struggling to find and afford childcare, it is even more difficult in these rural areas. And so in seeing that there is this great need, Senator Brown and Representative Perez introduced this Expanding Childcare in Rural America Act. And so this bill is intended to make childcare more accessible in rural areas. And what's also unique about this year is that it's the time for the reauthorization of the Farm Bill, which is a huge piece of legislation that is renewed every 5 years and is absolutely critical to agriculture in the United States. And it is actually expiring and due for reauthorization at the end of this month. And so Senator Brown, along with his co-sponsors, as well as Representative Perez and her co-sponsors, saw this as an opportunity to address the childcare crisis in rural America by introducing this legislation that will hopefully hitch a ride on the Farm Bill, be included in the Farm Bill when Congress does reauthorize it. That is something that I wanted to, make sure that I covered with you all, is that the Farm Bill so far has not really moved in either chamber. It's been, for those of you that have been following closely, it's been a very busy session in Congress with the debt ceiling negotiation in the spring. And now there not only is the Farm Bill expiring at the end of the month, but also just normal yearly appropriations when Congress sets the budget for federal programs also is expiring at the end of September. And so there's a lot of news media about the possibility of a shutdown if Congress does not address the expiration at the end of the month. So it's looking like it's going to get moved a bit farther down the road, that they'll do what's called a continuing resolution, which is when everything is just kept the same until they're able to really dig in on the policy and vote on it on both chambers' floors. So the timing of you all coming to DC and talking about rural childcare is really, really timely because these negotiations are happening right now. And as Crystal pointed out, when you all were looking at who the current co-sponsors are, you can see that we've got a long way to go. It's really strong bipartisan, equal Democrats and Republicans in both chambers, but with only 6 senators and 11 representatives, it would be a lot stronger if it had more co-sponsors. So it'll be really important for you all that feel moved by this legislation to mention it to your representatives if they are not already co-sponsors. Now, while this legislation unfortunately does not have any new money and doesn't solve, obviously, the childcare crisis writ large, but this legislation does allow, any programs, nonprofits, businesses that want to address the lack of childcare in rural parts of the country, they can apply to tap into this money. It could help build new centers, expand existing ones, or improve the quality of care. And importantly, it also helps give the United States Department of Agriculture a blueprint for future child care initiatives, allowing individual communities to respond to unique needs. And so what's unique, I guess, about this legislation is that it, like I said, it doesn't have any additional money, and childcare programs technically already qualify for these grants through the Farm Bill, but this would just prioritize childcare. And it's as we fight for childcare at the federal level. Anytime that we're able to really draw attention to the need and what possible solutions there are is obviously really good for us. And so we were really excited this year. It's the first time that the major farm entities, so like the American Farm Bureau, the National Farmers Union, have included affordable childcare in their priorities for the Farm Bill this year. It's the first time that these, huge, membership organizations have named childcare as one of, the things that they really want Congress to look at as they're reauthorizing the Farm Bill. And I also, just for a little bit of legislative history on this, when they were first talking about this bill in the spring, we were really excited because it included a 10% set aside. So that would have meant that that 10% of these grants and contracts would have had to go to improving access and affordability to childcare. But unfortunately, right before Senator Brown and Representative Perez introduced this legislation, that piece was taken out. So there is, like I said, unfortunately, no additional money. And both chambers have also committed to not adding any additional money to the Farm Bill. So any provisions within the Farm Bill are going to have to be done with the resources already available. But I say that just to try to make clear that, while this is definitely a step forward, and definitely, from my position at the Law Center, really excited to see a traditionally male field, put their weight behind childcare is huge. Anytime, childcare is not framed as just, a woman's issue, but critical to the operation of farms and to our economy and to our food is really important as we make the case to federal lawmakers to increase funding and supports for childcare and early learning. Some other reasons why rural and farm childcare is a bit unique is that as farms have become more modern, it's more common that both parents are needed on the farm, and also due to our tightening economy, many farmers are also finding that they also have to have jobs off of the farm in order to make ends meet. There's also a growing number of women-owned farms, and 3/4 of farm families reported difficulty finding and affording childcare. And women were twice as likely as men to report that childcare was an important factor in farm decisions. I think this is just like another example of when, there aren't those policies in place, ensuring that there's childcare, ensuring that there's paid leave, other, policy pieces that are critical to ensuring that families are able to balance their budgets as well as caregiving, that it really falls on the women to make do, because needless to say, when you're working on a farm, you're not working 9 to 5, which is like traditional childcare hours. And so farmers not only need access to childcare, but often non-traditional hour care. Farmers also, and people in rural areas also often have to drive long distances to find childcare. And it can really take a big chunk out of their day if they have to drive 50 miles, round trip, or even each way to the closest childcare center. Farmers also, obviously, and a lot of people just in the United States do not have paid leave. So they're not able to take time away from the farm for caregiving and still be able to balance their budgets. And also farm work is dangerous for children. I think that, in kind of like the media and in movies and TV, you see kids, just, tote along with their parents on farms, but it really is often very dangerous work. And it's important for children to have someplace safe and nurturing to be while their parents are doing, dangerous farm work. And then the last thing I want to mention on the childcare piece is that also at the end of September, there's a lot of cliffs happening at the end of September, but at the end of September, the American Rescue Plan funds, which helped stabilize and save the childcare system during the pandemic, those funds are expiring. And so a lot of states were able to do really great things with that money, such as lower or eliminate co-payments for families, raise wages, increase benefits, and give bonuses to early educators, as well as increase the supply of childcare when they were given this extra $24 billion to invest in their childcare systems. But unfortunately, a lot of that progress is at risk of going away once this money goes away. And so we're also, worried about, rural and farm worker childcare because of this money cliff that's coming up at the end of the month. And so we're also trying to raise the alarm to members of Congress about the need to continue that funding to stabilize the childcare sector. With that, I am happy to answer any questions or, please, Crystal or Ebony, if there was something you were hoping I was going to cover that I haven't covered. One of the things I meant to say is that the Bipartisan Policy Center and Save the Children have really been leading the charge on this bill and would be happy to connect folks if that's helpful.
Thanks, Whitney. That's awesome. And the Bipartisan Policy Center, such a great leader in this work too. They're actually going to be one of our presenters at our congressional briefing on that Tuesday morning, the 19th. So we're excited for that. Thank you so much for the overview of the bill. I have a couple questions to put your way, if you don't mind. One of them being, so the language that we want to use when we're taking meetings either with the House or Senate, and maybe it's two different things, just to be really clear. We're asking for co-sponsorship. Are we also asking them to consider putting it into that bill package, or we just want them to co-sponsor and that would prompt the Ag Committee to put it into the bill package?
That's such a good question. I would first, say, are you familiar, with this legislation? And have you considered co-sponsoring it? We're really excited about it, for the, some of the reasons I mentioned, or please use your own story. That's always way more powerful than spitting data points at members of Congress and their staff, and say that, as Farm Bill negotiations are going on, and we would really, appreciate your support in ensuring its inclusion in the final Farm Bill. That would be the strongest, ask I would say that you could have, is to urge them to include the ECRA, the Expanding Childcare and Rural America Act in the Farm Bill. And as you said, Crystal, too, it's a very strong bipartisan. I mean, you can point out, that there are, Republicans in both chambers, Democrats in both chambers, and that everyone recognizes the need to address the childcare crisis in rural America.
Yeah, that's really fantastic. And I appreciate that you pointed out again. I think most people will know that Mom Congress gets behind bipartisan bills for our Moms Agenda. We do cover a lot of legislation, and I should say we follow a lot of legislation. And then once we find out that legislation meets the criteria for being added to the Moms Agenda, we can elevate it to the level where we train here. And one of those things is making sure it's bipartisan. So that's really fantastic, because one of the things I think we were chatting about before we went live, Whitney, was about any fiscal implications, or will there be any conservatives who are concerned about, I know you said several times there's no new money allocated to this, that it's just reallocating the prioritization of the money. So if you could touch any more on like someone who's got a thought on financials or questions about financial implications, and then I'll call on Becky, who's raised her hand.
Thanks, Crystal. Yeah, it's a really good question, and definitely top of mind, not just for fiscal conservatives, but next year is an election year, and no one wants to have ads run against them that they're raising taxes or raising the national debt. So I think that is a really big selling point of this legislation, is that it doesn't cost money. It just prioritizes, as you mentioned, childcare programs in this existing program, and to also, I think, underline again that support from the American Farm Bureau and the National Farmers Union, also, which are very nonpartisan, bipartisan, not so I think definitely emphasizing to offices that this is not going to not raise the price tag of the Farm Bill or take money away from other pieces of the Farm Bill, because again, it doesn't have that 10% set aside that it originally had, and that may be a question that some folks had. They may have seen the original iteration that had that 10%, so to remind them that no, like this is really just that it will help childcare in rural America, but without that fiscal piece. Thanks. Oh, I think you're on mute, Crystal.
Oh my gosh, not helpful. Thank you. I was going to say, can you help us understand exactly what that 10% would have represented? So if that was like a sticking point for somebody, 10% would have mandated funds to be used in a certain way?
Yeah, it would have mandated that 10% of the Consolidated Farm and Rural Development Act, so the grant and loan programs under that act. 10% of it would have been set aside specifically to address childcare. But now it's equal footing for any program that qualifies under that act. Yeah.
Okay, that's fantastic. That's exactly what I was kind of wondering. I was like, what's the piece there that someone's going to say, oh, they took out the mandate? Okay, great. Now, if they want to use it for childcare, they can. Give people a choice. So, Becky, please go ahead and ask your question. Thank you.
Good morning / afternoon, ladies. So my question was, should we maybe have bill information for that specific Farm Act too, to see if our legislators are co-sponsoring on that? Or do we need like an infographic or anything specifically on that? That way we kind of can tell them that's part of the package we want it to be part of, or will the infographic that we have just specifically for this bill have that addition to it?
That's a really good question. So normally I would say, yes, that you want the information on the bill that you're wanting to attach it to. But in this case, I mean, the Farm Bill is one of the biggest pieces of legislation that Congress addresses. It's over $1 trillion. I guarantee every office you meet with is familiar with the Farm Bill, and knows that it's expiring at the end of this month. So I don't think that you need to have the bill number, have more information on the Farm Bill. That's very inside DC, like everyone knows the Farm Bill and will know what you're talking about. But that's a really good question, because normally I would say yes, but not with something as large as the Farm Bill. They'll know.
Thanks for that, Whitney. And thank you so much, Becky, for the really good question. That's great. I love everybody wants to be like fully prepared, so we're not caught off guard when somebody goes, what's the Farm Bill? What are you talking about? That's really fantastic. Well, that concludes all my questions. Does anybody else have a question or a thought that you'd like to share? Are you excited about this legislation? Is it going to serve your community well? We invite you to share any of that feedback. And I will be staying on for a couple of minutes after, as per usual, if anybody needs anything one-on-one from me today as we prepare for our DC Hill Day in 11 days. Oh my gosh, 10 days. We get there in 10 days. Very exciting. I will put out a reminder to everyone that we have another live training with Whitney on Monday. So we will make sure to send out a reminder information about that training as well. And this video and all the others for the 2023 Moms Agenda will be available on the members page and on our YouTube channel as well. Ebony, did you have any other thoughts or questions before I stop our recording today?
No, all sounds good. Thank you, Whitney, and thank you to everyone who joined us today.
Thank you so much for having me. And I just really can't say enough about how great it is that you're coming to DC. It's so important. Just remember that these policymakers and their staff, they work for you, that you deserve to be there, and that your voices and your stories are incredibly important. And I wish I could count how many times, there has been legislation based on anecdote, that there are members of Congress who vote based on a story they heard from a constituent, and that what you're doing is making a real difference. And so I really appreciate you taking the time away from your jobs and your families and your friends to come to DC. It really matters. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
I
Whitney.
see
And
another
really-
question in the chat that just came through.
Oh,
Crystal.
thank you. Thank you. If we think of questions later, who should we reach out to? Destiny, thank you so much for that. You can always send questions directly to me. I might end up circling you back with Whitney if I don't have an answer, or find another partner who can give really specific information if it's something that I don't have the answer to, but invite you to email me anytime with further questions about this bill or any others. All right. Thanks, Destiny, for that great question. Thanks again, Whitney. And we look forward to seeing you in DC. I know you'll be joining us on the Hill Tuesday, so that's very exciting. We will see you then. Everybody have a great day.